Hello, Gunner.
Yeah.
How's it going?
It is moving in a direction. I don't know. I don't want to say it's going because I hear that too often. But yeah.
Well, you know what they say, if you can move forward, start with that. Well, all right, so modular scripts in Unity. I'm ready, Ben. If you're already recording, that's cool, but I'll go ahead and continue.
Yep.
Cool. All right. So this is one of the asset shuffles that we did, the roll a ball. And I found that there were a lot of very similar components that I was writing that they all had the same basic behavior, but with one or two things different. So one of the things that I made was a pickup item. So if you touch this cube, I want it to like give a score or give like a sound or something. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Ben. Yeah, so if I wanted there to be a response, or if the player connects with a pickup, then a response happens where it plays a sound or it gives you some points. And then I thought of a different pickup that would give you some other kind of speed boost or something. And then I had all these ideas and I wanted a way to bring them together. And so what I came up with was something called a trigger volume. A trigger volume isn't a component in Unity. It's kind of like a video gamey concept. And I wanted to pitch this to you guys. So do you guys have an idea of what I mean when I say trigger collider? Or sorry, trigger volume? Yeah, trigger volume. So I'll give you an example. So think of like a story game where when the player enters a certain room, then the music changes and an enemy jumps out and the door shuts behind him. And so when the player got inside a certain volume, then there was a response. So do you have any? Does that behavior kind of like ring a bell, or is there something else? Do you have an idea of another example of a trigger volume?
Like a automatic door shutting behind you when you do something, like when you enter a room.
Yeah, that's the general idea.
Or like when you hit something like a button and it opens another room or door.
Yeah, or like a tripwire. If you touch something explodes, or just yeah. The big ones that come to mind are some I've heard them called needle drops, where you enter a room and then a new track changes or something like that.
I mean,
So
I've only thought about them as like just trigger colliders. I didn't think about like trigger volumes where it's like as long as you're inside a certain volume.
yeah, exactly. So you're on their track, and I've said it, I've mentioned it, but the backing, the Unity component that we'll use is a collider with its is trigger flag selected, and so that's the backing component that we'll realize this trigger volume with. So a collider that has its is trigger, or that is a trigger collider, it won't collide physically with any objects. If an object touches it, there won't be any exchange of force, so it won't get moved. It'll just pass right through it. But you will get the events. We'll get the on trigger enter and on trigger exit event. Unity will pass to us. So here I wrote this pickup behavior script. It's really simple, and I'll open it up. Yes. So yeah, I don't need that for now. But this is the basic behavior for picking up an object. So we've got the on trigger enter and the on collision enter. So on trigger gets thrown when if is trigger is true, and then on collision is if is trigger is false. So it's the difference between a collision and a trigger. This will work. The concepts will work for both of them, so I'll just leave them both in here. But we're going to go for the behavior of the trigger, where you'll pass through whatever collision we're interacting with. And so where I'm going with this is, let's take the case where you touch this and it turns on, or it increments your score. So first I do a check to make sure it's the player, so that, I don't know, particles going through this trigger won't raise this event, like only the player. And then I add a score and I destroy the game object. So the score doesn't really matter, but I just added this line of code to show that that's how you interact with it. So that's one whole script, 25 lines of code to do just that. Now, if we wanted to have another pickup, then you write nearly the identical lines of code, except you change maybe this line right here to, instead of increment score, I don't know, you add a power up booster. And it's all the same thing except for one line. And then another one I thought of, where if the player if the player like falls off and gets to a certain level in space, this was another example of a trigger volume. If the player touches or falls off a ledge, eventually they hit a point where the level kills them, and that's also trigger volume. So to do that, again, I do the same thing, except with one line of code changed to reset the player. So that's 3 scripts that do almost the same thing, and it's just a lot to cover. So let's modularize this. Modularity. So I will create a new script and we'll call it trigger volume. Yeah, trigger volume. We'll call it RGD for Rebel Game Devs, because I already have one of these, but I'll create a new one. So what I will do is I will copy and paste. Let me get rid of all this nonsense, just so it's a little less distracting. So I'm a tab hoarder.
That's a lot of tabs.
All right. So I just want the script in the pickup. All right. And I'm going to click new vertical tab group, and that's how you can get them side by side. So I'll copy and paste everything, but we'll make some changes. Actually, let's just stick with this one to make it easier. All right. So the concept that we have is, when this event occurs, the player entering the volume, we will respond with a certain function. In some case, it's adding a score. In another case, it's resetting the player, anything at all. But we don't want to write a script for every single one of those codes, every single one of those different behaviors. So what Unity has for us that we can use is a Unity event. Have you guys ever heard of a Unity event?
I have.
All right. Can you give an example of, well, I was going to ask a really leading question, but I won't go there. So the best example I can come up with for a Unity event that you've probably used or is really easy to explain is with a Unity button, or a UI button. So we all kind of understand the concept of a button. You click on the button. When you click on the button, respond with a function or with some series of instructions. So this kind of follows our same behavior. When you get the event, respond with a list of instructions. So if you've ever used a UI element before, or a UI button, you can create one under, you have to have a canvas, and you do right click UI button text mesh pro. Now the button has all these button features that we're going to ignore, because the only one I want to talk about is this on click, this little guy down here. So this is a Unity event, and I'll show you what one looks like in code. But for now, we can tell that it has a list of instructions that we can add to it, a list of responses or actions. There's lots of events. There's tons of vernacular. You'll hear throw or raise or invoke to like represent the event happening, and then the response or the actions, or there's lots of different words. But that's for the consequence of raising the event. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to say when I click on this button, I don't know, we're going to make this pillar disappear. Something real basic. Where'd it go? There. We're going to make the pillars disappear. We'll start with one and then I'll add more. So on click is an event, and what we do is we drag in. So I'll lock the inspector, which is this lock button up here, because I'm going to click over here in the hierarchy, and I don't want to lose my spot. It's kind of like bookmarking this. I'll drag this bridge pillar, and I'll drag it into the object field. And then over here, I have a list of functions. So, well, first it's a list of components. So game object, transform, mesh filter, mesh render. It's a lot of stuff, but what I want you to notice is that those are all the components. I'll uncheck this, and now I'm inspecting the pillar. Mesh filter, mesh render, rigid body, capsule collider, transform. Those are what we saw in that list is every component that is on this game object. So back to the button, I'll lock it. Back to this list. Again, these are all the components that are on that pillar. So what I want to do is just disable the whole game object entirely. And I do that with set active false. So calling this in code is the same thing as clicking this button up here. So this is the set active false, is if the button is unchecked. So that's all I'm going to do in code. So let's turn off the player for now, and we're just going to show that very basic behavior. Voila! I clicked the button, and the pillar disappeared. And this is, I would argue that this is modular because I don't have to create a new component to make 4 objects disappear. I just add more with this plus button fields, assign them all. Set them false. I'll play the game. And then boom, now they're all gone. So this button is a very, very modular script. You can invoke your own functions with it. You can hit the individual component itself. You can even reach into, well, as you saw, my button is on the UI, and that pillar is in the world, in the environment. So the UI is able to reach into the environment and handle stuff. So that's a really powerful script. And Unity does a lot of work in the background with reflection and stuff to expose this to us. So you can rig your game through the editor, which is really powerful, especially if writing scripts is difficult. So we didn't have to write any sort of locating code like GameObject.find with tag or something, or find object of type. We didn't have to create a field. We just drag it in here. So this is the behavior that I want to mimic with our trigger collider. So that was a lot of information on events. Do you guys, I want to pass it to you guys real quick. Do you guys have any questions or want me to clarify on anything before we move on? Cool. All right.
I think we're good.
No worries. Yeah, if you do have questions, just pop in and stop me, and I'll pause. Right. So click the button, which is essentially raise the event, and respond by shutting off these pillars. One thing I want to point out is turning off the game object was effective, but if we don't want to disable the game object, maybe we just want to make it disappear, we can hit the mesh renderer, and we can set the mesh renderer disabled. and that has the same effect of like turning off, like you can't see it anymore, hiding the visuals. It doesn't unload the entire object. So to that point, it's flexible. You can decide exactly how your object is, like you don't have to go through and recompile and write any more code. Like you can, there's a lot of nuance that you can do with just these events. So let's hide the button, and we're going to bring back the player, and we're going to write that trigger volume script. Yes. So first thing I want to do is create that button. So, or the on click event. So this whole structure where you've got the list and the pairings, we're going to create that. So what we need to do is be using the Unity engine .events namespace. This is like a folder that some extra behavior is located in. We're going to be using events, not event systems. That's UI. We're using events. So now we're going to do a public Unity event. We're going to call it on enter event. And this last part isn't necessary, but it's not Unity engine, Unity event. But sometimes it's good. Well, it is good practice. If you can set it to something, do set it to something. So I'll leave that in there. So I want to enter. I want to know when we're entering, but I also want to know when we're exiting on exit events. And then I'm going to duplicate this guy and do exit. So whenever the player exits, and I know it's the player because the tag is going to match. So compare tag is looking at this property here. So every game object has a tag, and you can give it the player tag. So I have, just to make sure I've done that, I have not. So player tag. Yes. So the object that has the collider should also have the player tag. So that's just the player, the volume doesn't do that. So this is just to make sure that like particle effects or missiles don't have this trigger. This is a way of like narrowing down what we're going to interact with. And actually, to that point, why don't we just make a public string collide tag, and we'll set that to player. Because while we're on the concept of modularity, let's just expose that. So now we can set this, it's public, so we can set it in the inspector, and that way we're not just stuck to colliding with the player. Now we can collide with projectiles. All right. So other is a collider. We're getting its game object. If it has this tag, then we will respond. So let's just erase these. And instead, we're going to do on event or on enter event. And we're going to raise. Nope, we're going to invoke it. Yeah, the nomenclature for events is funky. If you use other systems, sometimes they'll say raise or dispatch, but it all kind of means the same thing. So in this case, Unity events use the word invoke to indicate raising the event or ringing the bell or pushing the button. And then we're going to do the same thing with the exit event. So when the player enters, we're going to raise this event, and when the player exits, we're going to raise this event. And that's it. It's a teeny bit, no, it's the same, it's virtually the same number of codes or lines of code, but it's very flexible. So we're going to hop over here, boot this up. Actually, while that's compiling, any questions on the code side of it? Cool, no worries. I do want to point out though that on trigger enter is a built-in Unity callback. So similar to like start, update, awake. It's blue. IntelliSense let me know it's blue. This is something that Unity calls this on anything that has a trigger or a trigger collider and was interacted with some kind of rigid body. So let's click on the pickup. I'm going to hit F to focus on it. Now let's get rid of the pickup behavior because it's a lot. And I'm going to, nah, it doesn't matter. So we've got these events, enter event, exit event, and then the collide tag. So now we can do the same thing that we did with the button. So I want to say when I interact with this cube, in this case, I want to hide it. So I want to disable the mesh renderer. So I can either drag in a game object or I can drag in the component. But either way, I still have to click on the function, click on the component mesh renderer, and then I'm going to set enabled to false. So this will turn this false. We'll get that behavior. So that's all I'm going to do for now. I just want to test this. See if, yeah, cool. So it, yep, it worked. So as soon as I touched it, then I got that behavior. Coolio. I also have this rotator script on it that's making it, and just to be fancy. However, this also needs to, I need to get points. That was part of the requirement, as I want to increment this score counter up here. So I'm going to add, without creating a new script and recompiling and thinking of a new name for a new class, which is the hardest part of all this, and arguably the reason why I did this, because I hate coming up with class names. We're going to, let's see, how do I access that? Oh, that's the score. Okay, cool. This is just my generic score counter. It just reads the number here and displays it on the screen. So pickup, I'm going to drag in the score component. I'm going to choose this is the name of the component that handles the score. And what am I going to do here? Ah, shoot, I gotta read what I'm doing. Set score, add score. Yeah, we're going to do both of these. So I give it one or the other, it sets the score, then updates with the toString method. So basic UI stuff. So I'm going to go back to the pickup. I'm going to rig the score, set score. No, I want to add score. Yeah, because the idea is every time you pick one up, you get points. So an interesting thing to point out is here in the code for the trigger volume, no arguments. This is arguments are these bits here, like information you're passing to a function. I'm passing none of them. I'm just calling invoke. Yet this is the power of Unity, having this editor back you up. Is as you noticed before, I was passing a boolean to the function to mesh render.enabled expects boolean, and I passed it. And then here in the add score function, it expects an integer, and I just passed it an integer. If you want to take a moment and like steady yourself, that's cool. But like that's really powerful. That's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really awesome.
I just got to gush for a second because that's, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's super fantastic. Well, I love how you can just keep adding things onto that. You can just keep adding new scripts there. That's really great.
So I'll prove that this works, and then we'll go a little crazy. It passed it, so it turned it off, and it gave me the score. So that's cool. Now let's play a sound. So I'll add a space for it. I'll add an, what do you call this thing? Audio source? Yeah, audio source. So I want to play sound. Let's load it up with an explosion sound. Drop it into the list. And then we're going to do audio source. I think it's called play one shot. Yes. No, play. Yeah, if play one shot if you want to give it the clip, but I just did. So I'm just going to do play. So we'll see it. I don't know if you guys can, you probably won't be able to hear my sound, but I assure you the sound did in fact happen. No, I can't prove that, but you'll just have to take my word for that. But look at that. That's so no function or no arguments, a Boolean argument, and an integer argument. That's a lot of power.
Yeah, that's straight up the most attractive thing I've ever seen in Unity.
They're like so convenient.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so we're gonna here I'll show off Unity a little bit. And I'm gonna make a reset the player box. So I'm gonna create a cube, ginormous, lower down to about there. Make it 100 by 100. Oops, a little bit lower. Yeah, just a little bit lower. I'm gonna add our trigger collider. And I'm going to say that when the player, let's see, do I have something on here? No. So what I want to do is reset the player to the start point when that happens. So I think I can do that through the host. No, the ball controller. So sometimes you do need to add code. So in this case, I added one line of code to my ball controller script, which is a fair place to add this to. So I'm going to teleport the ball or teleport this object to a given transform. Transform, every object has a transform. So the reason I'm doing this is there is one limitation of events, is not it can't take anything. So I'm just going to say anchor. So to showcase the limitation, the ball controller has a script where if I supply it a vector 3 or a transform, it will teleport the ball to that location. So give me the trigger. This is the reset volume. I'm going to drag the player in. So when I touch the reset volume, it's going to do the ball controller teleport to. So notice it only has teleport to transform. It does not have teleport to vector 3. So a limitation of the arguments that you can pass is that you're limited to the very primitive data types, floats, ints, chars, booleans, but at least you can do Unity objects. So you can.
Could you overload teleport to with different arguments?
Yes, you can. So as we see down here, it is overloaded as one takes a transform and one takes an anchor.
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
But the result is that we'll have something come up on the screen here in a second. Is that Unity will only serialize only the transform one. The vector 3 one, it's too big, or there's some other reasons, but but the perk is that it does do Unity objects. So any component can be set as an argument. So there are times where you might need to create some line. Your days of writing code are not over, unfortunately, but so sometimes you have to do a workaround. So in this case, if you give it a transform, it just assumes the position. So to show this, I'll click the player. The transform that I'm going to give it is the start point. Oops. So it's start point, I think. Yes, it did. So the start point is just a little bit off the ground. Here, I'm going to tag it so it's readable. There we go. So it's just there on the ground. And when you hit this reset volume, it will set the ball player to teleport to that point. Oh no, it didn't work. That's because I didn't set the box collider to is trigger. So I'm gonna fix that because that's like the number one bug I get. So that's why I did this little trick. Was even if you forget to set it as a trigger, we're gonna collect the on collision. Yay, IntelliSense. There we go. Oh, collision. That's why it takes a different argument. All right. So a little bit of flexibility is that with the on collision, you'll now get regular events. This is up to you on exactly how you want to handle this. But I find why not include both? That way, if you forget to click this, you might see the ball like stop when it hits something, but now at least it'll work. It'll just be a little funkier. So let's see if that's at least it. Ah, shoot. Well, I don't want to debug that too hard. Set it here. Oh, did I not recompile it? I didn't recompile it. That's why. One more try, then I'll move on. And you just have to take my word for it. Aha! So make sure it's trigger, and then you as soon as you touch it, there it goes. All right. So the moral of this story, before I take a pause, is events. Unity events are pretty darn cool, and they're not. Yeah, I don't know. So I'd say that like get your game running. This is really quick to prototype and to try new things. And then once you say, yeah, that's exactly what I want the behavior to be, then you can go ahead and make your custom scripts and stuff. But it's a lot faster to iterate with just drag and drop through the editor than having to create and come up with a name for a custom script every time you need custom behavior. Cool. So any questions or comments up until this point?
Could you just go back to that trigger volume script? I've been driving, so I've missed parts.
Sure. Are you still driving?
Stop. Here we go.
All right. Cool. Do you still need to see it?
Yeah, no, that's great. No, this is awesome. This is my favorite thing I've ever seen in Unity, actually.
I know, right? Like, credit, because sometimes Unity makes me grind my teeth, but sometimes it does stuff like this, and I'm like, yes, thank you for your time and effort in. Yeah. All right. So there we go. We have custom behavior that's flexible, and we can use this to do power-ups. We can use this to play sounds, to increment the score. We can do everything with virtually one script. Now, do you guys a little bit hungry for more? Can I crank it up to level 2?
Sure.
All right. I'm gonna crank it up. So let's go back to the pickup. So I want you to notice that to do the score script here, I picked add score, which takes an integer. It says int. That's the argument it expects. I'll show you the signature. Not player host. Shuffle score. So that's add score. We're doing this one here. So we're just adding some points, and then it does some UI stuff. So the limitation here is I have to add the number 5 to the unit, or to the event field. So if this pickup had a special script on it where it gave you 10 points and this one gave you 25 points, there's a little bit of a problem there because you have to manually set the here. I'll show you what I mean. So trigger volume. So in this case, we're gonna have a special pickup. I'll create a new script for this. It's gonna be called points pickup. Where'd you go? Give me them points. There we go. All right. So in this case, Well, I am going to add this to the trigger volume after all, just for the sake of speediness. So this is a Unity event that takes no arguments, and that is why we're limited to, we have to manually enter the argument here. But say this is a special, I know how I'm going to do that actually. It's a special pickup. I'm going to use inheritance. You're going to inherit from trigger volume. Yeah. Now we get all this stuff for free. We're going to make this protected. That's an easier way to do it. Okay, so protected in C# means the same restriction as private, only this class can see it, except I'm doing inheritance, so I need to be able to access it from the other one, and then I'm going to make it virtual. So virtual means it can be overridden. There can be multiple versions of these functions. So points pickup, it's going to do exactly the same thing as the trigger volume, except it's also going to have a score value, or point value. And we're going to start off at 5. So then, in order to overcome the limitation of we have to add the point to it manually, we're going to rig it up using a Unity event. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to declare public score event. And it's going to inherit, oh, it's going to be a class. So bear with me for a moment. It's going to get a little heavy, but I'll explain it. All right, this over here. I'm gonna copy. We're just gonna do triggers, because I know those work. Actually, what am I doing? We don't need any of this stuff. We just need model behavior. Okay, I'll show you why. All right, so let's come back to this guy. So this is a funky line. Public class score event inherits from Unity event. These are angle brackets that say of type. So so this is a template. Anything you see in angle brackets, it means template. The key for word is template or generic. In C++, they're called templates, and in C# we call them generics. So I could make a score, I'll just call this, for lack of not finding a name, string. Now this is a Unity event that takes an int, and this is a Unity event that takes a string. So the point is that now, instead of calling invoke, we're going to say increase score. We're going to do the on gain score event. And then instead of invoke like this, we can't do that. We have to give it an integer. And so we're going to give it a point value. So in essence, public void invoke int arg. So this is the signature, the form that this is representing. So it's representing a function that that returns void and takes a single argument. In this case, it's an integer. So before, the other form or the other signature looked like this. It was a void function that took no arguments, and in this case, it's a void. So this right here is what you're doing to. You're basically showing, in this case, you're showing what the signature looks like. And Unity events support up to 4 of these, and they can be mixed and matched. So we could, in theory, have a integer and a string score event 2. I don't know. Now this score event can report how many points you got, and it can tell you how you got it or something, or a debug message. So what we're doing is we're declaring a new Unity event that can take that can invoke functions of this type. So that's all we need to do here. This is super small. Oops. So we declare a new event. We have some point value. Then we have an instance of this event, which we'll be able to see in the inspector. And whenever we're told to increase our score, we're going to do it. We're going to raise this event. So this is going to look a little funky, because there's going to be in order to reuse the trigger collider script, we're going to have an event call an event. So pickup points event is 1 line of code. Unfortunately, again, you're not done writing code. You still have to have a place to put this integer, and then you need a way to invoke it. So let's collapse this and bring this up next to it so we can see them. So same idea. When the trigger collider, or when the trigger volume is hit, we want to call the increase score event. I forgot to recompile. That's why there's nothing here. Oh wait, no, that's not true. We need to pull this up here. System. Let's try. Is that enough? So I'm trying to fix that. Unity isn't showing me the point value, but not the event. So I'm saying it's not serializing the event, and I'm trying to fix that. And I'll tell you exactly how to fix that as soon as I remember the specifics. Yes, it must be marked serializable. Once I verify this works, I'll explain exactly what's up. There it is. Okay, so in order for fields to appear in the inspector, they must be serializable, which is a fancy word for can be expressed as in a string, or like can be seen in the inspector is the easiest way to say it. It has to do with like reflection and examining metadata, but it just means it can be seen in the inspector. So in order to get a score event to be visible in the inspector, I moved it as a different class. Not positive that's a requirement, but I had to mark it as serializable. So if you ever create your own structs or your own like data types, if you need them to show up in the inspector, you'd be using system and the serializable attribute. And so now you can see that in the inspector. So where I'm going with this is that the pickup is going to have it's a points pickup, and it's going to increase its score. So we got to reuse the trigger collider again. So I didn't have to do all that inheritance nonsense after all. I could just reuse the trigger volume, and then it's going to invoke another event. So it's an event call an event, yes, but this one has a type argument. So now I'm gonna set my score, and now check this out. We have a new field section where it says dynamic. So and we see add score and set score, and then we see add score here and set score here. So if I do add score here, I got to type in the number. But if I do add score up here under dynamic, then it's automatic. so it automatically rigs it for me. So what I mean by that is in the script, it is sending the point value as the argument. So that point value is being sent into the add score, which is over here, add score here. So that's how you can get. So the moral of the story is, if we're doing a vector 3, we can make a vector 3 unity event. You can rig it that way so that so there's your solution to this vector 3 can't be sent. You can't send it with a basic unity event, but if you make a vector 3 event, then you can pass it directly as a dynamic variable. And so that's how you can do that. So that's kind of thick, I know. Is there? I'm going to take a drink of water. But is there any part of that you want me to double back on and explain?
I think we're good.
Okay. So to iterate on that, I'll show you the benefit of that. Is that I'll make two of those guys, 2 pickups. I'm just going to create a material here. There's going to be the red pickup. And then this one's going to be the gold pickup, because it's so you can be absolutely sure that this is the better one. So this one's going to be red, not red pickup. Let's do mesh renderer. Oh, you do have the red pickup. Oh, because I haven't made it red yet. That's probably why. And over here, I'll do the gold one. So red, I will make red. Gold, I shall make. What if I made it green? All right. So then the red one gives you 5 points. Let's get rid of. So it's not super clear on how to get rid of or how to remove these. You click on the space to the left of it, and then you click the minus button. And I got rid of that the add score because I'm doing the dynamic add score now. So pick up 1, and then same deal for you. We're going to remove that, and then you are so this gold pickup is worth 23 points, and the red one is worth 5 points. Five points. Sync. Oh, I touched it twice. Because I, my bad. Because I don't deinstantiate it. I only turn off
You
the
just
mesh
hide
render,
it.
so it's still there. Yeah. So that's a bug, and they'll fix it. We'll fix it in production. We'll release a day 1 fix for that.
I mean, you can type in the destroy command,
Yes.
which will
Oh,
destroy
actually,
on the.
you do bring up a good point. You can do on destroy, or however you'd have to write because destroy is a static function. Because it's static, you can't what do you rig that to in the scene? Like, where is destroy? Unfortunately, you can't do mono behaviors. So you do have to create a custom destroyer component that would let you do that. But you bring up a good point that we can do that, or we can just go back to the game object, set active, and just set it active to false. Or if we had an object pooler, then we could say return to pool, and it would handle all that. All right, so that is dynamic arguments with the Unity event. Have you guys had enough, or can I get to level 3? Level 3 is only a few minutes.
Go. Do it.
Yeah,
Sure.
you're into it. All right. So that's how you interface with events in the scene. So what we're doing, so these can be called listeners. because that's a relationship you have with events, is you assign listeners. So that's how you interact with events through the editor, but how do you interact with events through code? So this will be a little bit abstract. I won't get into nitty-gritty details, but I want to show the basics on events. So I'll just reuse this because why not? Private void awake. I'm gonna need this, and I'm gonna need private. Yeah. So let's we'll just separate from this for now, and we're going to learn how to subscribe and unsubscribe from events. So let's add a new event, and we're going to call this click events. All right, so I'm not going to get in the nitty-gritty details of like rigging this thing up, but I want to show how do you do this behavior of adding listeners pragmatically through code. So I'm going to make an arbitrary function that just does something. So this onClick event, we're going to say that this event is going to get called somewhere else. Just at some point, we're going to know that this event will be raised, and we want to respond when that happens. We want to subscribe a listener so that when it gets invoked, we will respond or we will handle it. I know there's tons of lingo. Every event system has their own words. But so at the end of the day, you if an event is a bell, some bells you pay attention to and some bells you ignore. So when you want to respond to a bell, you subscribe to it. So that's a word we're going to use. And you subscribe a listener. So let's say this click event gets when the user clicks on this game object, this event will be thrown, and we want to respond to it. So what we're going to do is we're going to call add listener, and then we're going to pass to it some function. Now, something to note here is I'm not calling this function. So this is when you call a coroutine, you'll do this pattern, but when we add a listener, we don't do that. Under the hood, functions are just labels. They're just like points of memory that we jump to. And so we are adding the function itself. We're not calling the function, we're using the function like a variable. This is its identifier. So we're going to add listener so that when this event gets called, then we respond by this thing. And it's good practice that anytime you add a listener, it's always good practice to go in and write the code to remove the listener. There's reasons you would do this for garbage collection and for like reference safety. So if this class subscribes, it tells the event, hey, pay attention to this. And so like in this case, it won't matter because this event is on this game object, but let's say we'll just pretend it's over here for some reason. If you subscribe to it and then this thing gets destroyed, the event still has a reference to this object's function, so that reference will prevent it from being garbage collected. But also your object was destroyed or was marked as destroyed, and it still has a reference to it, so you can get some dangling pointer action where it shouldn't be accounted for in the system, but it is. So the moral of the story is if you're going to subscribe to something, you do well to unsubscribe from it. So in this case, I subscribe in awake, which is the moment that it gets created, and I unsubscribe in on destroy, which is the moment it gets destroyed. Or it may not be the moment, don't quote me on that, but rather when it is being destroyed at the last moments, it will remove. Another popular place to do this is on, oops, that's not, you betrayed me, is on enable and on disable. So these guys get called anytime the component or the game object gets disabled. And so these are also popular places to put these. Just depends on what you need the events for, or like how you want to respond to the component being disabled. All right, so the moral of the story is what I'm trying to say is if you want a function to be called in the editor, you rig it with drag and drop, and if you want to do it through code, because you can do both, then you use add listener and you subscribe it that way. Cool. Any questions on that? All right, no worries. Well, thanks for listening, guys. I hope
course.
that was informative and you had some inspiration and some aha moments.
It was very helpful.
Let's clap.
I will also accept clapping emojis. Those are of equal value.
My mic isn't picking it up.
That's all right. We'll add it in post. Thanks, Will. Appreciate it. All right, but for real, I hope that was informative for you guys, because I didn't do my asset shuffle. I got distracted making this lecture.